Instead of having a middleman that can relay things for you, you take that middleman and you mitigate it into, thousands or tens of thousands of pieces, all the nodes in the network, to make that middleman something that doesn't actually have any kind of control. That's the design of Bitcoin, is breaking it up into as many pieces as possible to achieve stability, to make it hard to change, to make it hard to manipulate.
Hello, welcome to episode 63 of The Bitcoin Game. I'm Rob Mitchell. John Carvalho has been making waves in Bitcoin for years, never afraid to mix it up regarding cryptocurrency topics. From content creator to entrepreneur to chief communications officer at Bitrefill, John is a passionate player in the world of Bitcoin. Hey John, how are you?
I'm good. Ready when you are, man.
Before we get into Bitcoin, can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing before Bitcoin?
Directly before, I had my own marketing company. Based in Florida. I did that for about, I think, 6 years. Well, my whole story goes back even further. I ended up in Florida because I relocated for a large format printing company that I was working with in Boston. And I moved to Florida to take over that department, and because it was much cheaper to have a full facility there. And we had like a printing and sewing and welding department, and we were doing all these large things for like trade shows and stuff, like the stuff you see hanging on the ceiling and whatnot. We did stuff for like Wizards of the Coast and big companies. And I relocated to Florida and very quickly learned that, things weren't really going to work out there, and the company was kind of running itself into the ground. So I started doing freelance work to prepare myself. And that eventually led into running my own company and taking over most of the printing work in the area and doing websites and basically anything marketing related, with like a branding bent to it. Branding is something I'm really particularly interested in, and marketing and communications aspects of communicating a product to people, communicating values, and doing this in interesting ways.
So were you pretty hands-on with all aspects of that?
Yeah, I have a habit of learning something up until the point where I think I could master it if I wanted to, and then stopping. And Bitcoin so far is the only thing that's kept me interested for years on end, and I continue to learn more and more and more. And I don't think you can ever really master it. But I was very hands-on. I've been a graphic designer. I've done rebranding and logos. I've done website mock-ups. I've done UI. I've done UX. I've done a little bit of programming, but it's a little bit too tedious for me. I've done copywriting. I worked at a newspaper for a while. A lot of communication stuff. Project management. I'm crazy with project management and reorganizing and reprioritizing my calendar and things like this.
So when did you first hear about Bitcoin or get into Bitcoin?
It was late 2012. I forget the exact article or what it was, but I think back then there were a few major articles that got it some exposure, and the one I heard about it was related to Silk Road. And so I was like, wait, how are people buying drugs on the internet and not getting caught? And so I started researching it, and then I found like the Bitcoin forums and the IRC chats, and I was just like, the first couple of years, actually maybe just the first year, was just a process of capitulating into like being a total full-time Bitcoiner. And as I got more and more into Bitcoin, I got less and less into running my business. So and it was doing well. And I actually, towards the end, I spent 2 years winding down the business and passing on clients to other people just so I could only do Bitcoin.
I think I first heard of Bitcoin Error Log listening to Bitcoin Uncensored back when John Seth was part of it. And I don't even know, did you go by your real name back then, or were you just Bitcoin Error Log?
I went through some transitions. I used a few different identities before Bitcoin Error Log. I never used more than one at a time. And around the time I was Bitcoin Error Log, I was anonymous, relatively anonymous. And I just kind of got tired of building up a little bit of a reputation for myself and getting people to actually listen to what I was saying, and then scrapping it or having people like discount me just because I was anonymous. And at first when we were getting to Bitcoin in the earlier years I was around, people were much more paranoid about this. They thought, oh, if the government finds out that we're supporting Bitcoin, they're going to target us and we're going to get in trouble and there's going to be all kinds of issues. So people were kind of, I think, sometimes overly cautious, and I was one of those. I was definitely overly cautious. I wasn't doing anything crazy, and I just wanted to finally start using my name. So I was using a big red X icon, and then I just finally changed it to my name and my face around the time that I was getting into hanging out with the Bitcoin Uncensored guys. When I first started hanging out with them, I remember that they wanted me to come on camera and I wouldn't do it. I was like scared. I was like, man, I don't want to be on camera. Like, people see who I am, and I don't know if I'm going to be nervous and all this stuff. And, you know, that things have really changed in the last 3 years or so. You know, I used to be scared to even come on camera, and now I'm, I don't know, doing podcasts and doing Roger Ver interviews and shit like that.
The Roger Ver interview was definitely the first thing I can really remember. But you made some other content before that too, right?
Yeah, I mean, the first content I was doing, I had some blogs for a while, and I wasn't able to consistently keep up with, you know, making regular posts, so I kind of stopped. I kind of gave up on and admitted that it's not really the best format for me. And I was also hanging out a lot with the guys at a Whale Club. They used to hang out on TeamSpeak and just hang out and talk about trading and talk about Bitcoin stuff all day. So that's kind of where I started practicing doing audio and having debates with people with audio. And we even did some interviews with like BTC Vix and those guys, where we had like the Winklevoss twins come on and do an audio interview with us as a group. And they still do things like that occasionally, but the group kind of like split up into Whale Pool and other groups, and it got to be kind of dramatic. So I exited that and I started doing occasional video content. I would love to do more, but at this point, it's just really hard to be consistent and also work and get things done. And I always take on too much.
It's funny you're talking about Whale Club. I can't remember if it was Whale Club or Whale Pool. I would sometimes tune in for videos, and there'd be maybe when there wasn't an interview, but there would just be like looking at charts and a lot of silence between talking. Was that Whale Pool or Whale Club? It
was both. What happened was Whale Pool was like a faction of Whale Club people that split off due to political and dramatic concerns, where they kind of separated as communities. So Whale Club is still like one of the largest trading chat rooms that I know of, with the most people in it. But Whale Pool, I think, does more hanging out all day on TeamSpeak. But it wasn't just that. You know, with Whale Club, it was also, you know, there were times of the day or scheduled times where people would actually get together and talk about a topic or a conversation. It wasn't just about traders. It was also an opportunity to kind of teach the trading community a bit about Bitcoin and the difference between shitcoins and Bitcoin and fundamental aspects of Bitcoin, how it worked, what things I felt they would need to know.
Or some or all of the people in Whale Club or Whale Pool actual Bitcoin whales?
No, definitely not. It was more just a tongue-in-cheek name. There were definitely people that were whales that would hang out there and maybe not talk so much, and probably some of the people that are still trading now since back then managed to become or stay whales, because if they lasted this long trading, they must be pretty good at it. But in general, I think most people are pretty bad at trading, and most people just lose their money, and it's not really something everybody should fancy themselves to do as a career.
Were you ever aware of them trading enough to move the price?
I don't know. There were certain people that would have like legendary reputations, and you know, when they said something, everybody would be like, "Oh, look at what this guy said." You know, he says he's doing this, or he's in that position, or he thinks the price will go this way or that way. There were even times where I remember people would try being like, "All right, everybody, let's all go long," and they'd like share their positions and do stupid shit like this, and the price would barely move. So I think that, you know, there's an aspect of sentiment and an aspect of tribalism that can affect price with sentiment if that information spreads quickly and hard enough. But in general, I think the market always irons out any noise, and anything that people try to do to manipulate markets ends up costing them more than it's probably worth.
I used to always just wonder, just weird movements. I was like, it's some whales manipulating, not through social media, but just through buying and selling. But you don't think that's the case?
I actually think that moving markets is an expense. doing something, for example, like, a lot of people are trying to figure out why Roger Ver and Bitmain, got so behind Bitcoin Cash and what their whole strategy is. And I think their strategy is simply that they feel like they can float the market long enough to where they can unload their bags over years and still have more money than they started with. And it's not a crazy theory, if they own Bitcoin.com and Bitcoin handle on Twitter, and they have, significant mining hash power that's willing to support it and all these things as a centralized kind of cooperative effort, it's likely they can sell all those fake Bitcoins to people for more than it costed them. Will it be more than, if they had just held Bitcoin the whole time? Probably not.
Roger really was pushing for big blocks long before BCH. Like, he just genuinely believed that big blocks were the answer. Do you think that's true?
I can't speak for him, man. I think that his motivations are a mystery, especially after Bitcoin Cash and what he's been doing with the website and this kind of thing. It couldn't have only been about big blocks. I think there was an ego or a control aspect or a strategic aspect, because SegWit did increase the block size. The blocks did get bigger. They just didn't keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they weren't. And Bitcoin was so hard to change that there's just no way that the expectations that people of Bcash have for Bitcoin or their copy of Bitcoin could have ever played out on Bitcoin this way. To increase the block size repeatedly and not do SegWit and not have a Lightning layer, etc. It's nonsense. They were always bound to get kicked off of the network with that kind of behavior.
You see scam, not good faith, just different beliefs.
I don't know. I've certainly said in the past that I think it's a scam, and I certainly think it's a waste of money, and I don't think anybody should hold it or deal with it. If you want a coin, there are much better coins that you could use and not help those people. If you want to use an inferior network to transfer value, you only have to trust it for the amount of time that you're transferring the value, right? So as long as it has the liquidity you need and the trust you need for the time you need, you can use any network. But if you actually want to be able to store your value long term and build things on top of it, you probably want to be using Bitcoin. I wouldn't build anything on Bcash, and I certainly wouldn't hodl with it, because it's just a worse store of value. It's a more centralized network. The everything about it is just not the fundamental alignment that you want for a blockchain, and this applies to pretty much all altcoins, if not all.
What are the primary features of a blockchain in your mind?
Basically, censorship resistance, achieved through decentralization. I think that a blockchain essentially it's creating a bearer instrument digitally. So instead of having a middleman that can relay things for you, you take that middleman and you mitigate it into, thousands or tens of thousands of pieces, all the nodes in the network, to make that middleman something that doesn't actually have any kind of control. And so that's the design of blockchain and the design of Bitcoin, is breaking it up into as many pieces as possible to achieve stability, to make it hard to change, to make it hard to manipulate. And anything smaller than that is doing that to a lesser degree. So you can have a spectrum of networks that achieve similar, results to Bitcoin, but it really depends on what you're going for. If you're trying to store value long term, you pretty much want to use the one that's the least risky, because this is all still risky.
And so you're a self-proclaimed Bitcoin maximalist, correct?
Not really.
Oh, okay. Define yourself.
I definitely agree with all of the behaviors and all of the fundamental aspects of what would define a Bitcoin maximalist. But I don't ever think that at least not while I'm alive, maybe after I'm dead. I don't think I'll ever see a world where Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency. I still have some open-mindedness about whether or not there's a concept of multiple networks somehow being an efficiency over one network. But most of the time, this results in a poor incentive structure. So what happens is you get altcoins that exist, and they say, okay, why do we exist? Well, we have to promote ourselves in the light of Bitcoin, so we have to say why Bitcoin is bad. and we have to say why people should use us instead, why we're better than Bitcoin. They all just live in Bitcoin's shadow so far. Maybe, there is some actual utility, like the utility I mentioned of if you need low security and low censorship resistance and you just need to send $20 to your friend in some far off country quickly, then I suppose any shitcoin will work as long as that person can settle it on their end reliably. But if you want to be storing your life savings somewhere, I would never use an altcoin for that.
Do you think whenever there's another bull run that all the alts will probably moon?
It's hard. It's hard to comment on this because I've seen enough bear and bull cycles to where the altcoins are still around, and the last bull cycle was the biggest, right? So if we want to go by history, you could easily argue that the next bull run that things will be even more dramatic, and that altcoins will 10,000x, and in low liquidity things will like make people rich in random pockets. But I really believe that at some point, I think probably the next bull run, because this is the first time that Bitcoin's issuance rate will be one of the lowest in the world for a major asset. And so I think that what's going to happen is eventually Bitcoins are going to get really, really rare, and there's going to be fewer and fewer of them on the market. I think only like 3 million or so even move anymore, like in the past year. When you see a market, when you see a pump, what you're really seeing is just like the liquid Bitcoin moving, changing hands. And if, the next bull run comes and there's only 2 million Bitcoin out in circulation that people are actually trading, and there's like 10 times more shit coins, and there's ICOs, and there's security token offerings, and all kinds of whatever else they come up with, whatever iterative thing they come up with next time to fleece speculators, because they will be there and they will be all in line to take speculator savings accounts. Whatever it is could be even larger. But I think at some point, hopefully the next run, it should start to diminish. It should start to be where the shelling point of Bitcoin, it being a store of value, starts kind of being a much stronger point. I just hope to wake up one day, and see, oh my God, Bitcoin, what the hell did Bitcoin do last night? And see that it went up, 100% or something crazy. And then altcoins have only gone up 20%, and you see this sometimes with some of the price movements, but it still isn't like, we don't have a lot of evidence that's pointing to that altcoins aren't going to stop pumping anytime soon.
I like the idea of the constrained supply maybe helping, I guess, after the next halving and stuff. So
I think it compounds. People learn to hodl. And if too many people learn this, there just aren't that much Bitcoin left for people to trade to each other. And people will learn more and more. And I think we saw this with the last pump. Like, if you hold Bitcoin long enough, it will pump in your face and you'll regret every Bitcoin you ever sold. And that seems to happen roughly every halving or so, at least.
Have you been involved in any other Bitcoin businesses before Bitrefill?
Before Bitrefill, I was specifically doing Exotica. Exotica is a video streaming platform that allows adult live streaming, and it's all Bitcoin only. So it allows people to be able to consume, adult content live without having to give any of their personal information to the site, and kind of adding a layer of privacy and Bitcoininess to everything. That project was mostly like a garage startup with a couple friends of mine. And basically when the bear market came, we started having to spend too much Bitcoin to keep it floating. And I had to make a decision. I had to decide either whether I wanted to start fundraising and put together a pitch deck and double down and get this project the money I needed, or whether it was actually too early to do this kind of thing in the market. It just isn't there yet, and to try to see if I could join another project. And so I just did almost a joke, just a kind of test tweet, making of a meme about, needing a meme for my CV. Is Twitter a job? And Sergey from Bitrefill asked me if I was serious. And so we started talking, and it led to me joining Bitrefill.
I'm glad you brought up Exotica, because for some reason in my head it was jumbled, and I was thinking you were involved in Spank Chain.
No, I have had some good Twitter battles with them. I really wanted to get Amin on a debate with me at some point, because I did spend a lot of time researching that industry and getting embedded into it, and talking to models and talking to studios and talking to owners of campsites, and I've been in it, and I did all the research, and I pretty much know what can and can't be done feasibly. And I very quickly saw with the Spank Chain stuff that they were choosing the wrong path, and that it's not going to work. The model still isn't going to work the way they're doing it now. They've evolved it a little bit. And the sad part is I actually think Amin is smart, and I think Amin has a lot to contribute to the crypto world. I just wish he would stop doing it for Ethereum.
If you thought you had some funding, do you think you could build a better Exotica now, or do you think it's ready?
I think that maybe it's still too early. Everybody likes to say that porn is the first one to adopt technology and this kind of thing. Everybody likes to think of gamers as being really into technology and this. But those are two markets that really haven't taken for Bitcoin or for crypto in general. The only gaming you really see is gambling related. You're seeing some people do experiments with things, but they're not really taking off. There's a new batch coming through that maybe will be cool with people doing digital cosmetic items that on the blockchain, and that maybe could be interesting. I don't know.
Digital cosmetic items? What is that?
Yeah, like you have a skin for your hero that makes him look a certain way.
Oh, okay.
Or a certain sword or a gun, and that is cryptographically represented as unique.
Gotcha.
And being able to trade these items on open markets, I think it's an interesting concept. I don't know if it's interesting when you do it on Ethereum, but I do think it's interesting, and I hope that somewhere somebody finds an angle to get gamers into crypto. But it's the same thing with adult. The issue is that models don't really want exposure to volatility. They're not really saving at this point in their lives. A lot of them are young, and like any young person with any job, they're not really saving that much money. So introducing to the concept of Bitcoin, if they don't care about store of value, and if they do care about volatility, a lot of the campsites are already allowing people to buy credit at the site in Bitcoin. And some of them are even starting to allow models to withdraw in Bitcoin. So the site can just use payment processors and just use fiat in the platform, and payment processors handle any kind of crypto exposure people need. This doesn't get people the aspects of privacy and censorship resistance that they might want. But right now, there aren't a lot of people that seem to want or need that. So I think that it might still be a little bit too early. But I do think there are cool advancements that might make it more interesting. And I think eventually the entire, not just online porn, but every digitally based online business is probably going to be using crypto primarily, because I think that fundamentally businesses don't really want to specialize in financial things. They don't want to be accountants for their customers and have to deal with all kinds of, regulatory considerations. I think what they want is they got into their business to provide a specialized service or a specialized product, and they want to be really good at that. And I think that Lightning and Bitcoin allows that paradigm to be possible. And eventually, from where we are today, we'll eventually morph into a state where the internet is just using cryptocurrency.
Bitcoin specifically?
Yeah. I think that it'll be hard for, altcoins to go away because they're backed by so much money. I mean, if you look at like EOS or whatever, they have billions of dollars of a war chest. They're not going to go away anytime soon. So they have plenty of marketing budget to trap people for many years to come. If they don't fuck it up, which they probably will. But yeah, I do think that Bitcoin and layered technologies and scaling technologies like Lightning and maybe even side chains like Liquid will eventually make infrastructure possible. So payment processing will be a separate concern, and businesses won't have to worry about, all of the things they have to do to deal with their customers' money.
Gotcha. And I've got to admit, I kind of put my head in the sand as far as almost everything other than Bitcoin. It's just too much. Too much to pay attention to. It
does get to be too much. Like I got wrapped into a debate today on Twitter about token pay. Honestly, I've done no research on token pay. But what I do know is it's another altcoin. And they have some story about why their altcoin is the altcoin and why people should use their altcoin instead of other altcoins. And that's really the basics of what you mostly need to know with any altcoin. And if there's any altcoin that ever has a story that is more interesting than that, then that story will usually rise to the top, and people will talk about that side of that altcoin. Like if it's a privacy coin or, has some kind of unique staking aspect to it mixed with proof of work, or, the interesting parts end up becoming news and you hear about them anyway. So there's no point going and learning about every stupid coin that people love for the day.
The upcoming Bitcoin 2019 conference is taking place on June 25th and 26th in San Francisco. There's an amazing lineup of speakers, and it's one of the most affordable Bitcoin conferences around. Go to bitcoin2019conference.com and claim a 25% discount with promo code BG25. That's bitcoin2019conference.com, promo code BG25. The Bitcoin Game is also sponsored by BTCKeychain.com, probably the most well-known Bitcoin keychains in the world. Get your own. Just go to BTCKeychain.com. So you started with Bitrefill at what point?
In December of last year.
What does your job entail?
Chief Communications Officer. Basically, my responsibility is improving metrics, communicating with the public, and communicating our products. So I do, a lot of stuff with the social media, a lot of stuff with the materials, content, graphics, conferences, PR, events. But we are still a startup, so I do get involved with other aspects of the company, not just communications strictly, doing a little bit of business development, a little bit of, helping with the product and overall and the platform. We mix our teams. We're not just like teams working in silos, and we often across the company are collaborating on certain projects and doing sprints and things like this. So it's I wear many hats.
And how many people are employed by Bitrefill?
Currently about 15 across the world.
And describe what Bitrefill does.
Bitrefill is basically an alternative off-ramp for cryptocurrency users. Instead of having to use an exchange or a bank or such to be able to settle your cryptocurrency, you can convert your cryptocurrency directly into products and services through our 3 product lines. Our main product line right now is gift cards, digital gift cards. So basically you can use Bitcoin and some altcoins to purchase 700 plus different gift cards right now throughout 170 different countries. So you can use your crypto and buy gift cards. The second product line we have is similar, which is mobile refills. So if you're doing prepaids for your phones, this is something we're covering internationally as well. And the third newer kind of product line that we're doing is Lightning networking services, which is basically products related to making Lightning Network easier to use.
Cool. I'm really interested in the Lightning part, but I have no idea how a company like you guys acquire your digital gift cards or all that. Can you kind of explain how that works?
Sure. The gift card world pre-exists Bitcoin. So there's it's a deep market. There's a lot of infrastructure there and different types of businesses. So there are already like B2B businesses that, act as wholesalers for gift cards. We acquire gift cards in many different ways, but we only acquire gift cards in basically authorized ways. So we're not out there buying like resold gift cards from miscellaneous dudes. This is nothing like Paxful or anything like that. This is just, a business where we're accumulating different connections with either directly with suppliers of gift cards or suppliers of suppliers that have like gift card networks. And we're making these available for cryptocurrency. So we just basically make it, you don't have to worry about whether or not some company has now decided to accept Bitcoin. You can just see if they have a gift card, and the odds are if they do, then you can probably find it on Bitrefill and buy that for Bitcoin.
How do you guys make money doing that?
We have a margin, basically. Some cards we acquire at face value, or some cards actually higher than face value, and we put a margin on top of that. But for the most part, we make volume arrangements with our suppliers to be able to get the best price we can, and we do our best to keep the price at face value whenever we can.
And who do you think tends to use these services?
All kinds of people. I mean, we hear all kinds of weird stories about why people use the combination of Bitcoin and gift cards.
That's what I'm looking for, weird stories.
I'll tell you a specific one that happened recently. I think it was Nicolas Dorier. Mm-hmm. He plays PlayStation, and he bought some game. I don't follow gaming that closely these days. The only game I ever play is Dota 2, and even that I don't have time for anymore. But he was playing some PlayStation game, and he accidentally bought the version that was available to him, but it was like the subtitles they were in Japanese or something. And he didn't, but the version of the game that he wanted, he could only get through the US PlayStation network. So he had to buy a US PlayStation gift card from Bitrefill to be able to buy the version of the game that he wanted, and then come back to the European servers to be able to have his game in his home And there are a lot of weird little interactions like this that people do. I'm not aware of any gross illegal things people are doing, but people are just trying to basically overcome, limitations in different ways sometimes. Another reason is there are some countries that basically people get paid in gift cards and things like this, and so there's a culture of it. People getting paid in Bitcoin that need to be able to convert that into products and services. There are unbanked people, unbanked people that can acquire crypto but can't necessarily easily shop online with that crypto, so they'll buy cards to be able to get what they need, stuff like that.
So, I mean, obviously the average hodler probably doesn't want to spend their Bitcoin for a gift card, I assume.
I don't know. I think hodlers are less adept at holding than they let on. I think most people find it very difficult to hold their Bitcoin long term, and when they're facing gains, they're usually looking to realize those gains to some degree. And I do think some people use gift cards for that. I know I used them for that in the past. I remember using Gift, and when they would give you like 3% bonus or something for buying with Bitcoin, and thinking, okay, well, I need to realize some profit, and what I'll do is I'll buy some Amazon cards, so that way I have Amazon gift cards, and I can pretty much buy anything with those, and that'll be one place that I store my value.
So as an alternative to selling on an exchange, basically.
Yeah. I don't know why necessarily people would do this instead of having the cash, but it's just, I don't know, it's just something you think about. It's like, all right, I want to buy stuff with this, and I don't know what to buy, so I'm just going to buy a gift card.
The second thing Bitrefill does before we get to Lightning was what?
Mobile refills. So if you want to like top up your phone with minutes and this kind of thing, so we support like another, just as many, another, 800 or so, 900, I forget, different telecom companies that will let you refill your phone number.
Cool. Now on to I think the fun thing, helping people with their Lightning channels. Tell me all you can tell me about that.
Well, Bitrefill was one of the first companies to actually support the Lightning Network. I think they were even on the test net and accept it as a payment method. That positioned them for what we've been doing in the past few months, which is actually now providing some products around Lightning. The first product that we released was called Thor, and basically what Thor is it's a centralized place where you can buy a Lightning channel. So if you want to be able to receive Bitcoin on the Lightning Network, or you want to enable a friend to receive Bitcoin on the Lightning Network, you can come to Bitrefill, buy a Thor channel, and we provide you with basically the link or the code you need to load into your wallet, and it will automatically open a channel from our Lightning node to yours, your address. So this kind of came into play as something that was part of the process when people were passing around the LN Trust chain. So where they were passing the torch, this was a little nice community, a little phenomenon where people onboarded onto Lightning and learned how to onboard onto Lightning. And one of the first things they learned is they needed incoming capacity to be able to receive the torch. And so many times people were sent over to Bitrefill to buy a channel so they were able to receive this torch and pass it on to the next person. So this is just a way to make Lightning more usable while it is still being developed out. I think that there are a lot of little inconveniences right now that make people complain about Lightning not being ready, but a lot of these conveniences can actually be supplemented by centralized providers in a very minimal trust way, where like with Bitrefill, you only have to trust us for the moment where you're like buying the channel from us, and once we deliver the channel to you, you're connected. Then very recently at the Malta conference, we unveiled a kind of upgrade to the Thor service, which is turbo channels. Before you could only buy capacity, but now you can actually buy an amount of Bitcoin that's automatically sent into your Lightning wallet in a channel with us. And that Lightning Bitcoin is automatically spendable, instantly spendable. This is kind of a hack we did with the protocol that only works with people that are compatible with this hack. There's basically a structure that allows this to be possible. And so normally a person would have to wait 3 to 6 confirmations depending on their setup to have their channel be enabled. And we basically made that 0 with a change to how it works.
Is that something you're able to get in more detail about?
As best as I can, sure. I'm not a programmer, and I'm not the one who created this, but Anton from Bitcoin Lightning Wallet and his friend Martin both collaborated on this with Bitrefill to make it possible. And basically the way it works is because you're opening the channel with us, we're able to push the Bitcoin that we already have to your channel before the Bitcoin that you paid us with is confirmed. And there's kind of a little bit of a trust relationship here, but the way the game theory plays out is that it makes it pretty difficult for anybody to actually lose anything. When you buy the channel from us and we give it to you immediately, well, on the front end, from as a business, we're supposed to wait for your Bitcoin payment to confirm to make sure we've secured what you've paid for it. Well, Bitrefill accepts zero confirmation payments on Bitcoin in the first place, so automatically the first stage is instant. Now we have a trust relationship with you there where we're trusting you. Then when we pass the Bitcoin to you immediately and make it immediately spendable, you have to trust us that when you send that payment, when you try to relay that Lightning payment with that Bitcoin we just gave you, you have to trust us that we'll actually relay it and we won't pause you and we won't not route your payment. But your defense is if we behave in this way, you can just close the channel. And if you close the channel, the Bitcoin that in your possession will be rendered to you on chain. And so we're not really incentivized to play any games with you because you can just take the Bitcoin anyway. And so because there's this kind of unique relationship when you set up things this way, you're able to trust us and we're able to trust you and just make things all instant and not bother waiting for the confirmations.
I'm far from feeling like I totally grasp Lightning. I mean, I guess Peter Risen's abacus is a often referred to way to kind of visualize it. Do you like that metaphor?
No, it's lacking. It's appealing at first because there is a concept people have to understand of how the liquidity in Lightning works, but an abacus is too limited, in my opinion, to explain it because on an abacus, things move from one end to the other. It's just one bar. But the problem is that it's actually an array of abaci, and it's abaci of abaci. So everybody's keeping track of who controls what. And this control is being abstracted across multiple nodes. So it's a ledger. I've just started thinking about it this way, so I'm not sure if this is going to sound stupid, but I'd rather call the Lightning Network maybe something like a serialized mempool, because what it really is none of this is actually settled to the chain until you close the channel. So it's almost like an organized mempool. Instead of just throwing everything into the mempool and waiting for a fee, people are organized and they're creating a whole layer where they're throwing a bunch of transactions onto this layer instead of the mempool. And these transactions are just piling on and piling on and piling on. And then when people are actually done and ready to settle out, they ignore all of the history except for the most recent agreement. And that most recent agreement is what people use to settle the channel.
Is there any other stuff you want to talk about regarding Bitrefill?
Just in general that, we're doing our best to be a positive influence in the Bitcoin world. We're trying to, make a name for ourselves and be reckless, and we're really excited about Bitcoin and what's happening with the Lightning Network, and we have a lot of stuff planned. We're still getting our priorities in line, but there's so much that we want to do, and it's all going to be really exciting. And I really hope that we can be a big part of positioning Bitcoin and positioning the Lightning Network for the next bull run and kind of for the next paradigm of how Bitcoin will work in a scaled way.
What do you think of some of the custodial Lightning wallets, or just the idea of custodial Lightning wallets at this point?
This has been debated a lot lately, and I think that people just worry about it a little bit too much. I don't like the idea of treating everybody like they're stupid and acting like everybody is going to always do the worst possible thing because they're lazy or they're ignorant. While that may be in practice commonly true, it does not mean that we should just facilitate it and behave this way. So, you'll catch me on stage at conferences saying to be reckless and saying, that Lightning is ready now and all of this stuff, because I don't like that mentality. I do understand it. I do understand the need for caution and warning people to be careful and that Lightning might not be ready and you could lose some money. But in general, I don't think that that's a good approach. So talking about custodial wallets, it maps onto that. I would say if people just want to be able to play with Lightning and try it and start to learn what the concept of a channel is and the concept of capacity in those channels and what they can do and experience the kind of instantaneousness of it, and they want to use a custodial wallet or a web wallet to do this, big deal. Let them. that gives you the opportunity to teach them about what a difference is between a custodial wallet and a non-custodial wallet. People are going to use technology however they want. I don't think there's any such thing as bad usage. There's only bad design. And so if people are doing things with a design that you don't like, well, then you need to fix your design to make it so they don't do those things. You can't blame the people or nanny them.
When do you think, or do you think there'll be a time when transaction fees to use Bitcoin on chain will be high again?
Yes. I kind of think of Bitcoin as the blocks always are full. They will always be full, and they will be forever full. Even when they don't appear to be full, they're still effectively full at any moment. As long as the cost to filling a block is relatively cheap, somebody will find an excuse to fill it eventually. For example, we had the VeriBlock thing where they were trying to use Bitcoin as a way to build a whole shitcoin on top of it by using Bitcoin transactions to anchor into, and they ended up spamming. People think they ended up being part of the reason why the blocks got full in recent weeks. But before that, we had Satoshi Dice spamming the network with gambling, and back in the early days of Bitcoin. So I think the blocks are always going to be full. They're supposed to be full. Bitcoin is like the best store of value in the whole entire world. There's no reason why the blocks shouldn't be full all the time. So the real concern is, what do we do in a full block environment? It shouldn't be, oh my God, our block's going to get full again. Oh, the fee is going to go up. Of course they're going to go up. Bitcoin is fucking expensive. Bitcoin is secure. Bitcoin, there's no room for wanting everything to be cheap and free in Bitcoin. It's not the point. It's maximally redundant. You don't get things to be efficient and cheap by being maximally redundant. So I think that people need to take layers more seriously, side chains more seriously. I have a lot of skepticism about side chains, but basically just the fact that Blockstream is working on them, and those are some of the smartest people in crypto, I feel like I'm probably missing something, and eventually side chains are going to have a real important role. But for now, I'm more excited about Lightning and Layer 2 for Lightning, and I think that is the answer. Now, I also recently said I don't think Lightning necessarily is going to be cheaper than coins. I think that, if, like I said earlier, if you just need to send a quick amount of value with a low amount of liquidity need, an altcoin network could serve you. And I think that Lightning, just for the sheer fact that it's on Bitcoin and Bitcoin is better, could end up with a higher transaction fee than some altcoins would have. Probably in the next bull run, we're going to see $50 fees again. And I just think that's going to be the catalyst for people really hopping onto Lightning.
I guess one of the biggest things I'm trying to wrap my head around is opening channels in a high fee environment.
So remember this, the blocks might be full, but they're going to be filled with transactions. They're not going to be filled and nobody will be transacting. That just means people are going to have to be more efficient about the transactions they put on the chain. That's all. So for example, somebody like Bitrefill, we're doing tons of transactions on chain all the time, and exchanges are doing all kinds of transactions on the base layer all the time, and we had to get better at batching. We had to get better at being more efficient with the transactions we created because we didn't want to waste money on transaction fees. So we end up including more in a single transaction, or being more efficient with the block space that we take up with a transaction. And so I think that, for example, with Lightning, they're doing things where you're going to be able to do submarine swaps and various ways of maximizing the utility of on-chain transaction. So it might be something just as an example, if Bitrefill is an important node on the Lightning network, an important economic node in Bitcoin where people are using us for a lot of commercial purposes, like buying stuff, we're already going to be somebody taking up the block space. And so we're in a better position than maybe you might be as an individual to multi-purpose our transactions to be managing the liquidity of channels for ourselves and our customers. And so we'll be able to, kind of start automating and being dynamic about the liquidity and the channels we're connected with, and managing all of this for ourselves and probably others.
Is there any way for just random hobbyist user in a high fee environment to open Lightning channels in an efficient way or a more efficient way?
Was being a hobbyist ever cheap?
I'm just, I'm just curious if there are ways, or if basically there aren't ways. You're going to have to open it with a Bitcoin transaction.
Well, I asked that question for a reason, because there's a guy that I know that I really like named Vlad. He's a Romanian, and he's a journalist, and he's kind of trying to come up in the crypto world as a journalist. And he recently got a Casa node, and he wanted to do a review on it, and he was telling me his whole experience with it, and how he was really disappointed in Lightning, and how hard it was, and the issues that he had to deal with trying to onboard himself. And I was like, dude, like, you came into this trying to use this as if it was Bitcoin, and then you learned all the ways it's not the same as Bitcoin, and then acted disappointed. But if you came into this, knowing what it was for, like, you didn't use this for anything that you needed it for. You installed a node that you didn't need, that you had no purpose for. You tried to do Lightning channels that you had no economic purpose for. You were just being a hobbyist. You were playing. And you have to understand that that situation is not going to be optimal. Like, the optimal situation for people to use Lightning Network is not going to be as a hobbyist. Of course, if you do it as a hobbyist, and you're going to be forced to do inefficient things, and it will be expensive to be a hobbyist on Bitcoin, Sure.
I'm just trying to envision how things work in the future.
Well, look at the present. There are already some Lightning wallets that are trying to automatically open a channel for you as soon as you install the wallet. And that will probably get to be too expensive, but there are people trying to do it. There's a Lightning node that was giving out 1,000 channels or something a month ago. So we may see some subsidization from central companies trying to get people to use their product and get some kind of network effect for their own Lightning offering. And you might see them subsidize channels, and because in the end, the goal is what you're I know what you're asking. You're saying, when am I going to be able to just use Lightning and not have to understand it? And this is what everybody wants. They just want people to be able to use Lightning like they use Bitcoin, or even easier, because it's instant. And I think that will probably be where the market trends towards. I think we probably will see wallets where you open the wallet, you save your seed, and now you're on Lightning, and you have a certain amount of capacity. And if you're somebody that's a heavy user, then you probably end up paying some kind of fee to have your channel managed and all the things you need to not have to think about Lightning.
I'm not concerned about technologically a lot of these difficulties being abstracted away over time. I mean, that's what happens with everything. There's a cost to opening a channel. That's the only thing my brain kind of gets stuck on with a high fee environment.
Maybe it will help if you consider that you shouldn't be getting on the Lightning Network if you only need to do 1 or 2 transactions. It's not for you. Now, maybe if you get on the Lightning Network in the first place, in other words, when you buy your Bitcoin, you receive it on the Lightning Network, then you don't have to think about that, right? You're already on the network, and you can spend your Bitcoin from within that network. But if you're off the network and you only need to do infrequent transactions, well, you're kind of stuck with using the base layer, because it is pointless to use Lightning if you're only going to do 1 transaction or a couple transactions a year or something. It's not really necessary.
Interesting.
The economics will take care of it itself. I promise you. Like, what's going to happen is, if all you have is $50 of Bitcoin, you're probably going to be receiving it on Lightning in the first place. You're not going to be receiving that on chain forever. It's just going to be too expensive to receive on chain. People will just start selling you $50 of Bitcoin into your Lightning wallet, and that will be that. If you come at it from an economic standpoint of the market will find the most efficient route, I think in the end, what you can be confident in is that Lightning is much more efficient at doing multiple transactions, and Lightning does have the profile of being able to pay something instantly, whereas Bitcoin doesn't. So those 2 qualities will create a different transaction profile for users that they will use and they will pay for.
Is there anything else you want to say about Lightning?
Get them while they're cheap.
How did you end up in Romania, by the way?
My business partner on Exotica is Romanian, and that's how I ended up here.
What's it like in Romania?
So when I was winding down my business, I was also winding down my marriage.
Oh.
So I was getting divorced, and one of the reasons I was unhappy was I really didn't like where I lived in Florida. And so by the time I wound down the business and completed the divorce, I was just like, okay, now I'm ready to Bitcoin, and I don't know where I want to live. And I was going to move to Seattle because I really like Seattle. But then I got there and I was like, man, it's really expensive here, and I just want to do this startup. So I'm just going to go visit my Romanian friend and just work on this from there, because it's going to be lower cost of living and not have to spend so much Bitcoin to be able to take this risk.
What's it like there?
Romania is great. The climate's very similar to where I'm from in Massachusetts. It gets pretty cold in the winter, gets pretty hot in the summer. It's definitely a different cultural experience. Communism was not that long ago here, and there's a whole interesting story about how it ended, and it affects the entire infrastructure, the entire culture, and there are aspects of that kind of echo still. But I also find that Romania to be a much more down-to-earth place and more practical place than the U.S. The U.S. is just kind of like a little bit of a perversion of reality, in my opinion, and being in Romania, it just feels a lot more sane.
What's something that might surprise someone in a good way about Romania?
Romanians really know how to party.
Okay.
Like the club scene here is intense. The people are up all night quite regularly, like on the weekends for sure. Like people are, getting to the club at midnight and staying till 4 or 6 a.m. and partying all night. And the clubs are like parties. It's like, they can be pretty intense. A lot of people like buying a table and having bottle service at their table and having, dancers all over the place, male and female. It's, paid dancers and a full show, and, entertainment and DJs. And it's every night at pretty much any club in Romania is a party. Oh, also Romania has really nice malls. Compared to the US, like every city in Romania has at least one really nice mall.
Thanks for rapping.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Bitcoin Game. John's handle on Twitter is Bitcoin Error Log. You can find Bitrefill online at BITREFILL.com. Check the show notes page at thebitcoingame.com for many links related to John and this episode, including a link to John's action-packed debate with Roger Ver. See you next time.